Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas. And we are back on here this evening with another virtual event. Tonight, we're going to be hosting Alex Finlay for his new book, The Night Shift, and Lisa Gardner, whose latest book is One Step Too Far, is going to be interviewing him. So I have chatted with Lisa many times, and she's an absolute delight, and I'm sure that this is going to be a great evening. Alex seems wonderful as well. For those of you who are interested in ordering books or just finding out more about the authors, I've just put a link in the comments on Facebook and in the live chat on YouTube. We also have signed book plates available for The Night Shift. So if you are inclined to order a copy from Murder by the Book, we'll make sure to get you a signed book plate in with that order. If you have questions for either author, don't be shy. No such thing as a dumb question. And if it's really bad, I just won't show it. So you can put those also in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments here on Facebook, and we'll get to those later on. But again, your comments and your interaction always make these events super fun. So I guess we will go ahead and get to the stars of the show. Let me bring on Alex Finlay. If I click the button, there we go. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. I'm going to do your official bio really quickly, and we'll bring on Lisa and get the chat started. So Alex Finlay is the pseudonym of an author who lives in Washington, D.C. His 2021 breakout thriller, Every Last Fear, was an Indie Next pick, a Library Read selection, an Amazon Editor's Best Thriller, as well as a CNN, Newsweek, BuzzFeed, Businessweek, Goodreads, Parade, Pop Sugar, and Reader's Digest Best or Most Anticipated Thriller of the Year. Alex's work has been translated into more than a dozen languages and optioned for film and television. And as I said, he's here tonight to talk about The Night Shift, which is getting amazing reviews and feedback everywhere as well. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
We're also joined by Lisa Gardner. Hi, how are you, Lisa?
Good, thank you.
I was commenting, I feel like we just chatted not that long ago about your new book. It's so good to talk with you again. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll hear a little bit about it as well. But I'll do your bio also really quickly, and then we'll get started. Lisa Gardner is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 21 suspense novels, including The Neighbor, which won Thriller of the Year from the International Thriller Writers Association. An avid hiker, traveler, and cribbage player, she lives in the mountains of New Hampshire with her family. And as I've said, One Step Too Far is her latest book. Okay, I will be back in a little bit. If there are any technical issues or anything goes wrong, I'm going to be sitting right here. Just call me back on. Otherwise, holler when you're ready for questions. Have fun.
Thank you.
Alex, it's so good to be here. It's so good to be with you. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you. I'll tell you, like 10 years ago when I was imagining getting published, like the idea that I'd be talking to you right now was just like, one of those things. So it's a real thrill for me. So thank you. You've been always so gracious and supportive, and I just can't thank you enough.
The publishing world is filled with these fan moments, and I'm here as a true fangirl. I think it's no secret that I loved Every Last Fear. There's possibly a Lisa Gardner quote floating around that novel. And I will say, having said that, I absolutely adored The Night Shift. Like, read it in a single sitting, didn't even get off my couch, which, when you're a thriller writer, and you read a lot of stuff, I can't say for every book, but that book hooked me from page one. Amazing cast of characters, as we're going to get into, and some interesting choices in characters, as we're going to get into. But it's always a huge pleasure when you open up that book and it just sweeps you away and captivates your world. And I think now more than ever, we need escapism. So thank you for the powerful story that is The Night Shift.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. That's lovely to hear. So thanks.
So let's talk book. It's so fun for me, because now I get to ask some other poor author, where did you get your ideas? No, all the fun questions, and I just get to, enjoy myself at this moment. So, Alex, let's talk about The Night Shift. One of the things I was really intrigued and going into kind of the making of the story is somewhat similar to Every Last Fear. You have kind of a backstory crime and a current crime, and how they all weave together is incredibly important. But I was really captivated by the number of story elements you brought in, all that have really strong hooks to them. The cold case, a terrible tragedy that had happened in a town years ago. the lone survivor, which I think among thriller readers is always very captivating. And then I am going to say my all-time new favorite character, Agent Badass, the absolutely enormously pregnant FBI agent. So talk to me. What was going in your mind as you put together the cast, the plot of The Night Shift? Because wow, what an incredible recipe for a great thriller.
Oh, well, thank you for that. What was really going through my mind is my deadline was roaring at me like a freight train.
I like the honest answer. This is how things get done in the writing world.
I had actually, every last fear was well received, and in our business, there's something called the sophomore slump.
Yeah.
that kind of haunts an author, and so I had written pretty much almost an entire other book, and just really didn't feel like it lived up to Every Last Fear. And so, I talked to my agent and then my editor, and they were super supportive. And I just basically late in the game started again. And it started with the prologue to The Night Shift, which is, those who haven't read it, it's 1999, New Year's Eve at a Blockbuster Video. And for those of us of a certain age, we kind of remember heading out to Blockbuster on Friday night, trying to beat the masses to get the latest release of video. And, it's an otherwise normal night, and then something terrible happens. The employees are attacked, and there's only one survivor. And to your point, the final girl kind of trope in our business has been done a lot. And so, but this is how it came out. And then I started thinking, well, what can I do to make it a little different? And it kind of came from my own community in the DC area. We had two pretty similar crimes at workplaces a decade apart. One at a coffee shop in Georgetown, and where all the employees were murdered tragically. And I remembered it well because 20 odd years ago when I first moved to DC, it was big news, and they had just caught the person after several years. And then 10 years later, near my house at a high-end kind of athletic store, there was another kind of one of these after-hours crimes. Two employees, they're in the store, and one is just brutally murdered. The other's tied up and left there all night. And it just rocked our community. And then the big twist is, in that case, it was staged. One of the employees had murdered the other and was later convicted for it. And so I didn't base The Night Shift on either one of those, but they kind of made me think about these particularly kind of insidious crimes, like the workplace crimes are just, for me, we all had part-time jobs at one time, and we kind of remember that fun excitement. You got to hang out with older people, and there's kind of a camaraderie. And I thought that was an interesting setting to develop these characters who kind of just came from that initial idea.
So one of the things that struck me reading this, and I'm glad you brought up Blockbuster, because there's no doubt you get some nostalgia, particularly with the old crime, so to speak, the first crime, which is what, like 15 years before the book opens, 10 years? I can't remember now.
15 years, yeah.
15, yeah. And, you definitely get that nostalgia element, which I feel also is very popular right now in books, to go back in time. But you also have the strong sense of place, that 15 years ago, this absolutely terrible thing happened in a relatively small town. And the person everyone thinks who did it got away. And now it's happened again and again. You get that same level of intensity, kind of over adrenalized of the prosecution's office, the police force, citizens. Like, we have to stop this. I mean, what went into you in making this community?
Well, I think that I try and explore. In Every Last Fear, I tried to explore kind of a systemic problem, which was false confessions, particularly of juveniles. And I like to weave kind of some of those issues into my books. And for The Night Shift, it doesn't get into too much, but there's this kind of idea, and a lot about this from the D.D. Warren series and everything, is tunnel vision. It's like the police tap in on someone, and then basically everyone else falls by the wayside. But I honestly thought having the main suspect disappear gave me an opportunity to explore kind of a different aspect of the crime, which is the family member of the accused, and so one of my point of view characters is named Chris. Mm-hmm. He was 12 years old when this happened. His name's been kind of mud in this small town because his brother's the accused murderer who's disappeared. and he's from an abusive home, and it kind of has had a ripple effect on his life. And I thought it would be interesting to explore kind of that person 15 years later, in addition to the victims of the crimes.
So what I love, because I mean, trust me, the plot in this book is exceptional, but I really do read for character. And what's interesting to me is that The Night Shift is a fabulous study in trauma. And you can talk about trauma to a community. You know, this crime that happened 15 years ago never got resolution, right? Because the person they thought did it has never escaped and has never been caught. So you have kind of this open wound in a community. But then you bring it even closer to home. You introduce Chris, the brother of the person who was suspected. But then we also have Ella, who is the lone survivor of the original crime. And the way her wounds have not healed. And here we are again. Talk about the creation of Ella. Went into the making of her, because I thought a lot of the psychology there, particularly trauma survivor, was spot on.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, that's what I wanted to kind of, the theme, if you have to have, pick a theme for a book with me, was kind of the legacy of trauma for all of the people involved. And with, with Ella, those chapters kind of wrote themselves. I mean, in the first drafts, whereas, I wanted to damage a person who was really out for good. She became a therapist to help people, victims, because she never felt understood. But she also makes these like terrible life decisions, and because of her family circumstances, she's never really, to the extent you can recover, she's not in a healthy place with what happened to her. And so then she has this other victim who she's brought in to help, and it kind of opens all these old wounds. But she also sees something in this other victim that she didn't see in herself, so it kind of actually makes her kind of just the way she processes it and gets attached to this girl is kind of unique. And so she just kind of came as I was doing. I tried to do research that I could, but everybody deals with trauma in different ways. And so it's definitely a tough subject. It's like grief, nobody does it the same exact way, but there are self-destructive tendencies in some people. And she certainly has them.
I love how human the people are. So yes, we meet Ella, who, 15 years after surviving this terrible night, is now a mental health professional who's still clearly indulging in very self-destructive behaviors. But then also that brings us to Chris. He is the younger brother of the kid who's suspected of doing the first crimes. He changed his name, he's adopted, and in many ways, he actually got, you could almost argue, a better family situation out of this than what he'd been in, and certainly what Ella has. And yet that lack of resolution, that lack of being able to cope with what happened 15 years ago really haunts him. And I love his obsession with this podcast and this, what if his brother really is out there, and what if he really could find him again? Like, he is a lawyer with this rich fantasy life.
Yeah. And, it's I like Ella. Chris went into a profession to kind of help people in his mind, and particularly his brother, who he's like the only one who believes his brother's innocent because he just knew the kind of person his brother was. And his brother was a protector for him in an abusive kind of family. And so I thought it would be interesting to make, Chris a protector of sorts. A public defender had gotten his brother out, and then his brother disappeared, and he's now a public defender. But there's a lot of, kind of dissatisfaction with the realities of that job, his this kind of open question in his life. And he finds escape in, of all places, these YouTube vloggers who I based them on real kind of vlogs that, during the pandemic, as we all were, I was home, and I came across these and started getting obsessed watching them, with these kind of interesting characters who go out in the middle, all over the world. And they're entertainers at the same time, but they do adventures. And so I thought, the thriller writer in me was like, well, what if one of these real people was a killer? And that kind of led to the book.
So then we'll get to the third pivotal character, who is my favorite. So again, you have a lot wrapped into this book. You could say it's a little bit of a legal thriller because you have Chris in his role as a public defender. It is a, psychological thriller, and that we have Ella and trying trauma, and then poor Jess, who's the new survivor, and that whole relationship. But it is also a police procedural, which brings us to my favorite character, Agent Badass. And I just have to ask this. You not only bring in a female FBI agent, but you make her 8 months pregnant with twins.
Right.
What went into that decision?
Yeah, I've been hearing about that a little
So
bit. It was just kind of like, so actually the Agent Keller was in Every Last Fear, and I never intended to bring her back, but readers connected with her. And then as I was writing this book, I needed a law enforcement type. And so I just started writing, the character as her, thinking I might change it. I think that, with Frankie Elkin, you never thought you'd bring her back, but then these things happen. And so that led to that. And then it was a timing question more than anything. In Every Last Fear, it was, if you time it out, Keller at that time had twins, 5-year-old twins. And so just my timeline, she pretty much would have had to be pregnant, and they were twins. And so that's kind of what led to that. But, as far as, my reference point was my wife, who worked till the last day of her pregnancy, but she didn't have twins. So, so I think there is a difference, and a pregnancy is different for everybody, obviously. But I thought it just, added something to Keller, in addition to just the necessity if I wanted to be consistent with Every Last Fear.
What was interesting to me is that she is Agent Badass, but not in the way we're used to thinking of it. I talk about, Dee Dee Warren in the series, she's a badass Boston detective, but she's kind of physical and she's cutting and she has this edge to her. Whereas really for your character, it's that maternal instinct. And you bring that to life so powerfully. I mean, her superpower is essentially being 8 months pregnant with twins. And she's got, all those motherhood hormones going on. And, as they try to railroad certain things or the local police kind of run amok, she's the one who's like, hell no. But that image of the 8-month pregnant FBI agent having to waddle into situations and be like, no, was just so powerful to me. I mean, did you always see that coming? Do you discover these moments as you write? What is your process?
I think it's you discover, it's a little of both, that you discover it as you go. The Agent Badass references, she does something in the book, for those who haven't read it, that is caught on that becomes like a viral video. And so they, the internet kind of calls her Agent Badass. But at bottom, I like writing Keller. I like writing her husband, because they're we write thrillers, and a lot of our characters aren't decent people, and they're really have problems, which makes things interesting. But for me, she's just like a calm in the storm. She's so decent, so just kind of, great at her job, but decent, empathetic. And I just think kind of provides just a calm as you're kind of going through these pages. You kind of get a break with Keller and her husband, and it's nice for me. It's nice to see a couple that's really supportive and like each other in a genre where often the husbands and wives or significant others are trying to kill each other or something. So it's a long-winded answer, but she's one of my favorites.
Well, I have to say, that's one of the things that really works for me reading it. You have it's a pretty violent book. You're dealing with 2 very significant mass homicide situations that are not pleasant. You have Ella, we've already established, is, very edgy and dealing still with the trauma of 15 years ago. We have Chris, the brother of the suspect, who's kind of still trying to figure out his life. We have Jess, who is now the new survivor, but clearly is hiding all these secrets. And to me, you're right. Agent Keller and her husband became the resting point. You could breathe a little in those scenes. And I always feel like that pacing really helps with a thriller, that it's a good way of keeping people engaged. So let's get to the core of all of this as writers. So do you plot this stuff out? Is this a conscious choice, or is this how things develop for you in the writing process?
It's really, for me, it's a little of both. I always kind of come back to that kind of, unsatisfying answer. But it basically, I kind of had an idea where I'm going. I think of the book in 3 parts: beginning, middle, and end, because I'm not that sophisticated, and that pretty much works for me. You've got to have those 3 things. And I think about, I'd love to hear your view, having, written so many books, like where, if you, how you go about this, because I never stop thinking about the book when I'm working on it. It's just, it's a constant. And so, and often I'll do before I put pen, start typing on the keyboard, I'll have the scene pretty much mapped out in my head. So I write pretty quickly, but it just takes forever to kind of think it through. And I'm more of an outliner, but in my head without writing anything down, if that makes sense. But I'd love to hear like what you do, because
that's kind of a good description. So, well, before we get into, let's ask this question. Do you know who did it? Like, how far ahead do you have outlined in your head? Because I only know like 50 pages at a time. But you're right. I get that in my head and then I can write it. But again, it's still coming out in fragments. Do you see the book? Do you see pieces of the book?
I see basically I see, so it doesn't overwhelm me. I really think of it in thirds. And then I think I just got to get through this third. And then I'll get to the middle. And then I kind of take it there. I kind of start by the time I'm done with a third, I think I know who it's going to be, because I've kind of likely introduced most of the possibilities at that point, but it changes. And for me, the trickiest part is nothing, particularly with seasoned mystery thriller readers, they're on to every trick, and it, you want to, and so it's tough to try and trick them. And so it's that for me is kind of, after I've got the first draft down, it's kind of trying to calibrate, deciding who it is, and then how much, and often you have to, I have to go to other people because I know it so well. I've been thinking about it too long, and I just have no perspective at all. And I know things that aren't written that have been cut, and I don't remember they're cut. So it's
sure.
very hard. Yeah. So, but I'm not a total seat of the pantser where it's like, I just don't, like Lee Child, I guess, just sits down and, miraculously writes these books with not knowing anywhere it's going to go. I do not have that in me. But I also am not a detailed kind of, I tried outlining once, like doing a detailed outline. And for me, it felt like a job. Like felt like I was like, coming in, I'm going to do this scene now. I know where it's going. And it wasn't as fun for me. So I just kind of feel like if it's not fun for the writer, it's certainly not going to be fun for the reader. And so I'm kind of at a midpoint where I just try and do as much organically as I can, but try and loosely kind of know where I'm going, so I don't have to redo a whole bunch of it at the end.
It's interesting to me. I feel like our new buzzword for the past couple of years is hybrid. And you're kind of the hybrid writer. I mean, generally when you talk to writers, it's like, I plot everything out so I know exactly what I'm doing, or I'm seat of the pants, meaning I know nothing. Mm-hmm. And you're somewhere in between, which is kind of fun and refreshing to talk about. So before you even start, I know you have a great background in law, and the scenes with Chris as the public defender, I have a feeling, come naturally. But there's clearly a lot of thought and research, particularly in trauma, psychology, police procedure, that went into this. What is your process for research going into the making of the novel?
It's really after the fact in a lot of sense.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I basically take a guess in the first draft, because I don't want to stop. So I have like my first drafts are filled with, I put a hashtag like for names, for if I don't know something, a hashtag, and I just try and get as much down as I can and take a guess at what the procedure might be, or what the legal piece might be. And then when I'm not in writing mode, or, kind of have that momentum going, I use that time to search my hashtags and do the research. Because I can easily search things like, and that's when I come up with names. I hate doing names. I don't know how you feel about names, but
I don't like names.
I hate doing names. And so, but oftentimes they'll come way after I've started the character, when I'm at the grocery store, and then I'll come home and I'll search for the hashtags and fill in all the names or whatever. But I do that with the legal research. And here, it wasn't, I'm a lawyer, so some of the stuff you actually build on what you already know, but I still had to do research. I mean, one of my challenges was I have these two, murder cases, and there's no real federal kind of hook to them. Usually, murder's not a federal crime, but I wanted to bring Agent Keller in, so I had to kind of figure out, well, how I don't want to get angry emails from lawyers, or about that I, screwed this up. And so those kind of things, like, you have to be clever. And I talked to, I'm lucky to have a lot of contacts in the legal world, and for that I talked to the former U.S. Attorney of New Jersey, who kind of immediately said, "Oh, here's what you can do," and gave me an immediate kind of plausible hook to have an FBI agent in those kind of crimes. And so that kind of stuff's fun. And otherwise, I just, I don't know about you, but I can get lost in the sauce of research and finding out new things. And this time, I don't know, I ended down a rabbit hole of there's research studies on people who are super active on social media and who virtue signal, and it turns out that maybe not surprising to anyone that they tend to be have a disproportionate number of them who are psychopaths or who are extreme narcissists, people who are like really extreme on social media. And so those kind of things are kind of fun to go down the just procrastinate basically and add one line in the book.
So it's interesting to me. I was actually just doing yesterday a presentation with Kimberly Howe from the International Thriller Writers and a great novelist as KJ Howe on research. And we even kind of went back and forth on the subject that research for me often is how I develop a book. Like I have to do it to see the novel. But at the same time, what you're talking about, sometimes we also use research to justify the vision we already have. Like you said, you want Agent Keller involved. Well, there's got to be a way of doing it right. And I always feel like, the real experts in the world, that's what they're really great at. When you come to them and say, I need this to happen, just tell me some kind of reason why it would. And you could see them getting kind of excited, like, ooh, how can I make, how can I make this happen?
No, that's true. I had an instance of that recently where, and I'll often, like I said, research for me often comes when I'm not feeling the writing momentum. So it often jumpstarts me where I go into it, and then that gets me back to writing. Yeah. And so recently, in the book I'm working on now, I have all things have kind of a scene in a West Virginia coal mine, and I knew nothing about coal mines or anything like that. And so I was on a lull, and I reached out to some experts, and I ended up, at the West Virginia University has this coal mine rescue program. They have a giant artificial coal mine, and I went up there.
Coal mine rescue program. I've never heard of that. I got it.
No one would ever, and again, a whole new respect for coal miners. But the piece of that that's more memorable is like my wife came with me, and our January was our 30-year anniversary, but everything was
congratulations
on to the COVID. She's like, this is being married to a writer. I get to go to a coal mine in West Virginia as our one night out.
30 years is cold, because I don't remember reading that.
Yeah, I don't think it is cold. I don't think it is cold.
Well, I'm for your wife's sake, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that year 31 is not cold.
That's yeah. There might not be a 31 if it is.
So research for you kind of comes and goes, because it's interesting to me, because I can't write with, like, research is how I see the book, but you see the book and then it's kind of this back and forth relationship.
Yeah, I think so. I don't really like, I'm a lawyer. I do research for a living. And so I don't love research. I like meeting people and I do think it adds to the, whenever I do research, I'm really happy I did it, but the thinking about doing it, I'm not particularly enthusiastic about it. And so I think I kind of back into it, like you said, but some of the things that I think end up being the better, more authentic parts of the book can often be just the result of that research. And your research obviously shows in your books. And, I know you go for your last Frankie book, you went to like the rough neighborhoods in Boston and things like that. That's probably, and your latest One Step Too Far. I can't imagine me going out in the wilderness. I've had very few experiences, but I see you. I know you're an avid outdoor person.
I cheated with that one. In fact, now in hindsight, I'm like, I should have written a thriller about hiking years ago. Apparently, that's what So what are your hobbies? Because I kind of use my hobby in One Step Too Far to kill people. What about you?
I'd say that I play guitar terribly, but I have I still practice law, and so I basically practice law, write books, and spend time with my family. And that's about as much as I've got in me these days.
Well, that's pretty impressive. So talk to me about how you juggle all of that. So, what are the nuts and bolts kind of writing schedule? Again, you're coordinating it with work, with family. What is the day in the life of Alex Finlay?
Well, it's not, it's certainly not the making of a thriller, but I've practiced for, more than 20 years. I really still love it, and I have great colleagues. And my practice is mostly appellate law, and so it's writing. I mean, it's basically the 90% of it is writing, and it's actually storytelling too. It's just I'm telling my client's story, and the difference between writing a novel and that is that I'm constrained by the facts in my legal practice, whereas the freedom of writing novels is if something, I don't like something, I just kill somebody, or I just change the setting or whatever. And so there's something freeing in that. Pre-COVID, my schedule, I balanced it by, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, so I would commute into the office, which door to door, even though I'm 7 miles away from downtown DC, it's still 45 minutes to an hour taking the subway, getting there and walking, the blocks to the office. That's when I would write, in the morning on the way there, night on the way home. I do it every day. And then on the weekend, I would take all of that and, put it in a, Word document. And then, that's when I'd edit. And that's basically how I read every last fear. And for the night shift, it was a pandemic book, and I realized that I was really not writing. I didn't have the momentum going, and I was at home. I wasn't going to the office anymore, and I realized it was because I wasn't doing the commute. I wasn't moving, and something about this habit I'd gotten into, moving while I was writing on my phone. And so then I just started going on these like super long walks. And I'd write scenes on my phone. I'd go for like 3-hour walks and down Connecticut Avenue in DC and just write things on my phone and dump them into a Word document at the end of the week. So that was kind of my thing.
So, all right, see, that's hiking for me. It's been like 20 years now, but those 6 miles in the woods is how the books get written. So I was lucky because during COVID, I live in the mountains of New Hampshire. I could still go out in the woods, but it was interesting. I did something with Karen Slaughter a few months ago, and she was talking about, she didn't realize how much of her writing was travel. Being on the road, even promoting other books. And now that she's sitting at home, she's like, I can't get anything done. It all happened when I was, traveling. And I'm like, I don't do anything traveling, but I'm with you, that walking momentum or that kind of routine, but some movement to it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how the brain gets activated.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, to Karen's point, like when earlier in my legal career, I used to, I would just have to grab moments when I could to write other than the commute. And I would look forward to like a really long trip because I'd have uninterrupted time on a plane, no phone, nothing else distracting me. So I would use those times, but most of it was that morning and evening commute.
Yeah, see, and I feel totally lazy now because I look forward to long flights. Like I actually love a 12-hour plane ride, but for me, it's because then I could read as many books as I want and watch movies.
Yeah, I like movies. I definitely like movies.
Be kind of a commercial fiction junkie. It's like in your real world, it's harder to get that time to binge watch.
Yeah,
long plane rides for me are like woohoo, books and movies. Can't wait. So, talk to me about then book a year. It seems like.
Yes.
So what's the writing, editing, that kind of process, the bigger picture of it all?
I think it's pretty conventional. We're kind of on a schedule that the publisher puts together, and for people not in the publishing industry, I found it pretty surprising. It's pretty regimented. They have a schedule, and they, you're pretty much done almost a year beforehand, and you have. You're working on edits along the way. And so that's pretty much my process. The night shift was a little different, as I mentioned, because I started a new book really late in the process. Yeah. So that was, and thankfully the publisher and my editor compressed their schedule, which was great of them to do. And that definitely helped, get it done. But I don't know how you juggle that. I still have a hard time. You're talking about a book that you kind of finished a long time ago. You're working on a next one, and now you have to come back and talk about that one. And I actually get things confused, and I have to kind of brush up on it. Does that happen to you? Or
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And then when you get the international stuff, and a lot of readers don't know this, but the international publishers, different countries are on their own publishing cycle.
Yes.
So in January, I promoted 3 different books in 3 different countries.
Wow.
And no, yeah, I would have to look at notes, and I would have to I'd have to refresh
Right.
characters' names before the various conversations. And I still famously did an entire interview for France where I talked about the wrong novel. So yeah, it's not bulletproof by any stretch of the imagination. And they were so polite about it to the very end, and they're like, "I think maybe you are not talking about what we are talking about," which is a very French way of saying, "What the hell's wrong with you?" You know?
That's great. That's good.
All right. So, Alex, you get it right the first time then in this process, or how much editing, rewriting do you do at the end? I'm trying to decide how much I like you or not.
No, I'm look, I write half the book on my phone. So you wouldn't be able to, read a sentence if there wasn't a lot of editing. I'm a big, yeah, I'm a big, I think writing is rewriting kind of person. And I know that I'm done editing when I just can't stand to read it anymore. And I can't find any words to cut or change. But that can be reading. I don't know any drafts you go through. I'm sure it's many just because how great your books are, but you've had a lot more practice. I'm sure it's a lot fewer than I have to go through. But I just read. I just constantly read the thing, loop back, read it again, read it in a different format, and try and do anything I can to pick up things that you just naturally gloss over because you've read it so many times.
Yeah, I think that's one of those big misnomers that somehow the more we do this, the better at it we get, or at least I tell myself that, because I still rewrite the living daylights out of everything. And it's been 30 years and I still rewrite the living daylights.
Well, that's not encouraging. That's you're giving me no hope now.
Yeah, well, this is how I console myself. It's process. Everyone has their process. Lee Child very famously never rewrites anything, and I try not to hate him for that.
It's hard. I've heard him say that too, and I'm just
messy is apparently my process. But as long as it looks good at the end. So, all right, we have a couple of questions. So I just want to say again, what a great page turner, and how it all comes together to be a stellar. And the fact that you saw that only in pieces is amazing to me. And I won't give anything away, but it's actually one of my all-time favorite endings as well. I thought there's some nice synergies there. So, okay, McKenna says we have some questions.
We do. Okay, that was a wonderful chat. Before we get to the questions, though, as always, I like to give our guest moderators a chance to talk about their most recent book. So, Lisa, tell us about One Step Too Far.
Oh, so Alex and I touched on it briefly, but my latest novel, One Step Too Far, is about a cold case specialist, Frankie Elkin, looking for missing persons. And this time it takes her to the mountains of Wyoming, looking for a lost hiker. She rather bravely signs herself up to join this team of 8 going into the woods, even though she's not really a hiker. And pretty quickly, very bad things ensue. And Frankie gets to wonder just what she's gotten herself into and how much she can trust anyone that's part of this expedition, because clearly there's much more at stake.
Sounds like you've done that a couple times.
Yeah. Basically, if you want to go in the woods and feel like, incredibly dangerous and a lot of people die, what I say, it's Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None goes for a hike. That's kind of it.
Perfect. It's great. Excellent. Okay. So for both of you, which writers have inspired you or do you admire? And why don't we start with Alex?
Oh, there's so many. And this is my plug for the International Thriller Writers Organization that Lisa mentioned before. In this journey of getting published, so many writers from that organization, just were so generous in, advice, writing advice, business advice, just support. And so it's truly for any aspiring writers out there in mystery thriller genre or any genre, frankly, I'd encourage them to look into it because it's just such a supportive organization. I hate this question because I can never narrow it down, and it really depends on, I was a big reader before writing, and I don't know that many novelists, successful novelists, who aren't, kind of avid readers. And so for me, it's just really the mood I'm in. If I want, a twisty, psychological suspense, Lisa Unger, Gillian Flynn, Liv Constantine. If I want, kind of my favorite kind of procedural character, Dee Dee Warren. Lisa has obviously been a big influence on me, and biggest compliment I've had is people comparing Agent Keller to Lisa's characters.
Nice.
If I want action, Lee Child, Barry Lancet, Greg Hurwitz. If I want to spot one of my favorite kind of espionage thrillers, it's by Terry Hayes years ago. I wish he'd come out with another
I Am Pilgrim.
Book. I Am Pilgrim.
We've had more customers for years want to follow up to that book than maybe any other book ever.
Wait, I didn't know this. So say this again.
Oh, it's Terry Hayes's I Am Pilgrim. It's a procedural, but an international thriller, but like a solid whodunit mystery all in one. It's a hell of a book. It was several of our favorite books, favorite book of the year. It came out at the bookstore, and he can't get a second book out.
I think it was like 8 years ago, Lisa, but if you haven't checked it out, it's
forever ago. And we still have people who are like, hey, that book? It's got Pilgrim in the title. Like, is there another book by that guy? So yeah, wonderful, wonderful book. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
No. I'm glad to, I've mentioned it in other things because I just really kind of, it breaks a lot of conventions. It's like 700 pages. It's super engaging. And so I lost my train of thought, but the bottom line is obviously I could go on and on with the list, and it's just the genre. It's just an honor to be part of because there's just so much talent. It's intimidating in a lot of ways, but it's also knowing how kind of supportive and nice everybody is. It kind of takes that away a bit.
Yeah, Lisa, how about you?
Oh, so this is fun for me. And I'm really happy, Alex, you called out international thriller writers, because I think people don't realize, even though we're authors, we are huge readers. And I mean, there's all these like the fangirl moments. Like one of the best parts is I think thriller authors, we love to hang out together. In fact, I always joke at writers' conferences, you should find the thriller writers at the bar. We're much happier too. I think we've killed people all day long. We're just in great spirits. We're the people to hang with. But we love what we do, and we love getting to still read and meet other authors. So, I mean, I'm going to agree with you about many of the favorites, Alex, and I'm actually really excited to get another reading recommendation because that's what this is all about too. So the I Am Pilgrim sounds great. But I mean, I was reading John Saul, Stephen King, Sidney Sheldon, which is not a name we talk about enough, but when you talk about some of the great 80s page turners, it was absolutely Sidney Sheldon. I love the Gothic novels, which clearly I think comes across my work. Everything from Daphne du Maurier to Anya Seton to, A Dark Stormy Night, Fearing the Person Who's Sleeping Beside You is absolutely the kind of books I love to read. Greg Hurwitz is absolutely phenomenal for action. I love Lisa Unger. Karen Slaughter, Tess Gerritsen, Joe Finder. I mean, we are surrounded by so many great novels and talent out there. I've recently been reading Mark Graney and the Assassin series about to come out on Netflix.
The Gray Man.
Gray Man. Thank you. Love it. I mean, it's so much fun, and especially now when you get to come into a new series, get to read all of the books. Like, it's like, a buffet for your reader.
Yeah. Tons of great recommendations in there. Thanks, guys. I can't remember. You just did, Lisa, you just did a list of reading recommendations. Was it in the New York Times by the book or?
It was.
And so it was funny because John came into the bookstore and he said, oh my God, Lisa's list was the best because you can tell she wasn't just picking books that she thought people would, think needed to be on the list, but like it was across the board and it was just like chock full of amazing reads. So we all read the buy the books, but we had a conversation in store about how wonderful yours was.
I'm a huge commercial fiction reader. I mean, that's what I grew up with. That's what I love. And I read across genre. I read a lot of romance and historical fiction and young adult and our kinds of suspense. And it's interesting because I wrote that like 3 months ago and it just finally came out and everyone's come out of the woodwork. Finally, books real people read. And I'm like, well, you've all been doing it wrong then, because it should be books real people read.
Yeah,
and there's so many great books out there.
Absolutely. You filled your column with what people would call guilty pleasures, but they're not guilty pleasures because, like, who needs to feel guilty about reading something you love? So it's great.
I want the book that keeps me up till 2 a.m. and I'm late for work the next day. And I have to say, like, that was the night shift. I sat down, I'll read a few pages of this or a couple chapters. And next thing I know, it's like, okay, 4 more chapters, I'll go to bed. I mean, that's a great night. That is a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have a question specifically for Alex. Do you use a pseudonym because you are a practicing attorney?
I use it for a couple reasons. I published a couple legal thrillers under my real name, and when I wrote Every Last Fear, my publisher thought it had a broader audience, and it was an opportunity to kind of distinguish the legal thrillers and hopefully break me out as an author. And so that was kind of the genesis of the pen name. It's kind of weird. I've since learned that in most professions, I'm a lawyer. When somebody doesn't use a real name or something, a little sketchy about it. But in publishing, it's it's so common.
Par for the course.
Yeah, it's definitely. And so, but the genesis of it was that, and it actually has, as far as my law practice goes, it was the legal thrillers. It kind of dovetailed with my practice, but it just made sense to kind of separate the two different types of books.
Yeah. And then we have a question specifically for both of you. With several books now, how have your writing processes changed over the years? And what process tips do you wish you had early in your careers? So let's start with you, Lisa.
Oh, dear. How has it changed? I think the interesting thing is how much it didn't change, but you kind of thought it would. And this somewhat also dovetails into what I wish I had known in the beginning. It's okay to be uncomfortable. I mean, writing is a creative endeavor. You can try to follow a formula. You can sit through some really great workshops of other, huge authors saying this is how to write a book. But at the end of the day, it's you and a blank screen, and you're going to just have to fumble your way through on your own. I've never been great with outlines. I've always done a lot of research, and then I've kind of written the book. And to be honest, it's always a hot mess at the end. And 30-something novels later, I really thought maybe I'd be smarter by now. But it is the process now. I just build in time for it. I make sure I work with great editors because I'm like, I'm going to deliver a little bit of a hot mess and you're going to have to work with me, which really, again, at this stage of your career, some editors are like, wait, you want to be edited? And I'm like, oh no, I'm telling you now, it's a requirement. It's going to happen. It's part of the process, which, is a bit of a surprise at this point. And it is a surprise to me too. But, you enjoy the ride. You come to terms with the fact you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, and I spend all day long breaking eggs.
All right. How about you, Alex?
My process, I think it's kind of such a personal thing for writers. I think I'm in the whatever works, whatever's going to get words on the page, because if you don't do that, then you can think about the book forever. You can fantasize about, being an author, but that's basically, 9/10 of it. It's just get something down that then you can work with. And my process is, changed more so just, I tried to get published for a long time. But when I had younger children, I wrote late at night because that was the time I had. And then as they got older and I started the commute thing, and now I'm kind of going on crazy long walks and tapping on my phone. Things I wish I would have known. I think you can get lost in reading too much about craft, and that can defer you from writing. At the same time, I think there were some basics that I had to learn by, trial and error that could have helped going to like the Thriller Fest has Craft Fest where seasoned writers do workshops and things. And I think that those at the time we didn't have that when I first started. I think it could have shortcut a lot of the stuff that I just kind of learned by mistake. Because I do think there are some basics that at least some people say there's no rules in writing, but there are some things that editors and agents are going to look for that you can learn pretty quickly talking to some seasoned people who've been doing it for a while. And I would have if I go back in time, I'd do more of that work, but not get too immersed in it, because I think you can get to a point where, you're trying, it's not like making a cake. You can't just, go to so many things and then put it all together. It has to be a little of both trial and error and kind of learning things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd say whatever you're doing at this point is working beautifully. And I can't wait for a third book, which I understand is coming. Exactly. Okay, I think we've done it. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Lisa, for hosting such a great conversation with Alex and moderating. I always joke that my favorite people on these events are the guest moderators because you make my life so easy. So thanks for doing that. Alex, congratulations on the new release. Looking forward to much more coming from you over the next few years. Hopefully, when the next one's out, we'll be able to have you in store. That would be
that would be
very
great.
nice.
Great.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone for watching. So I'm going to go pour myself a glass of wine, and cheers to you both. And have a great evening. He's got his ready. There we go. Okay.
Congratulations again, Alex, on a fabulous.
Thank you,
process.
and everyone, please pick up One Step Too Far. It was absolutely. I didn't get a chance to say how amazing it was.
Yeah, and thank you, McKenna. I really miss going to the Murder by the Book. I so look forward to being able to come in person again.
Well, you're always welcome, both of you. So have a great night, and hopefully I'll see you soon in person.